Welcome back to Omni Football. Today we have a very special guest in the house. We have Andres Tello. He is here to talk to us on the podcast, give us his insight, and just be an honorary guest. How's it going?
It's going. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. So why don't you give the people just a little brief history about you and soccer and how you are.
I played soccer growing up. Always had fun playing it. Fell out of touch with it. Always kept in touch with the World Cup and everything like that. And then fell back in love with soccer around 2012. Started watching Arsenal again and have missed very few games since then. Mostly watched the Premier League, U.S. men's national team, everything like that.
Nice. Yeah, actually, that's actually kind of around the time that I started watching the Premier League too, around 2012. But I remember that we used to go to some LA Galaxy games when we were younger together. So I feel like we kind of... Do you think that we started with the MLS in terms of professional games, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, other than catching the odd like U.S. men's national team game on TV or everything like that, it was mostly going to Galaxy games from your dad taking us and really growing to love the sport that way.
Yeah, I remember that. What's it called? I definitely remember that we would catch like the odd like Clásico game. For anyone who doesn't know, the Clásico in World Cup in the world football scene is a game that's periodically hosted once a year, twice a year between Real Madrid and Barcelona of the Spanish league. Those two teams are probably still the most popular teams in the world, would you say?
Yeah, probably up there with Man United.
Yeah.
I think it's them two and then Man United somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Mm-hmm.
So I feel like at least when you're younger and you don't really have your own like loyalties to your team, or you haven't really picked a team to like support, I feel like you kind of fall into the Clásico, either Real Madrid, Barcelona, because it's kind of just like the best game of the year, kind of. Would you say?
Yeah, I think that's definitely where you can see some of the top talent in the world go at each other. I think throughout the years it's gotten pretty intense in terms of like fouls and everything like that. I think it goes through its drop-offs when like elite players leave or they start to decline, but I think it still holds up pretty well.
That's true, actually. I would say, I don't know, maybe it's nostalgia, but I remember when we were younger, I remember the Clásicos being more of an occasion and having more superstars maybe than they do now. I mean, it's kind of true to say that Real Madrid and Barcelona have both kind of fallen off a bit from where they were quality-wise, right?
Yeah, I'd say for Real Madrid, obviously losing Cristiano Ronaldo is massive.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't producing like he used to, I think just losing that star appeal on the field is massive. And I think those teams were a lot more dominant in the league, and the matchups between them were almost like 6-pointers, where a loss against their rival could like very well determine who wins the league that season. But yeah,
that's a good point. I think that the Spanish league for a long time has been dominated by those two teams, Real Madrid and Barcelona. So I feel like that was also part of the occasion. But yeah, so we definitely have grown to love the game from a long historic run here. Definitely watching different types of soccer. So it's good to have you, man. Hopefully we can get into some interesting topics of conversation. So this podcast is going to primarily focus on the U.S. culture of soccer, specifically the MLS and, the U.S. team in general. So this podcast is going to be called Road to World Cup 2026. So for all you who may not know, the the podcast, or sorry, the United States recently, within the last couple of years, won the rights to host the World Cup of Soccer, the World Cup, here in the United States in 2026. So technically, it's going to be the U.S., Canada, and Mexico try hosting it, but the U.S. is going to have the majority of those games. And it's interesting, too, because the last time I believe the World Cup was here was in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also interesting because it's also interesting how that relates to the MLS, because I remember that reading that we at the United States won the bid to get the 1994 World Cup because we committed to making a professional soccer league. So that was one of the stipulations.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to host it in 1994, and 2 years later, the MLS started.
Yeah. No, that's huge. And also, with it being in the United States, our parents actually went to some games, which is huge. Remember my mom, who's not a massive fan, but she went with your dad to the game where I believe his name is Andres Escobar, I want to say. The defender for Colombia scored the own goal.
I don't remember that, no.
Yeah, I think he was later killed in Colombia.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember that story. Yeah, that was actually a pretty sad story to hear. I didn't know his name, though, but...
Yeah, I believe that's his name. But, yeah, I remember.
That was that World Cup?
Mm-hmm.
Dang, yeah. We may be able to pull up that story in a bit, but, yeah, I remember hearing about that. I mean, definitely the world of soccer is important for a lot of countries around the world, especially the World Cup. And definitely... I mean, soccer players in general aren't necessarily immune to violence or danger from their own country. I know that I think it was Egypt that I was reading about recently that were really threatened during the last World Cup by people in their own country because they had a lot riding on it, right? I guess, and if the players didn't perform, there could be consequences and threats against them. So definitely the world of soccer is definitely a complex place. It's not just rosy and cheery all the time, especially in countries where it's maybe not even a safe profession, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's crazy. But so going back to 1994, that was the last time the World Cup was here. I don't know who won that 1994 World Cup. I want to say France did, but I could be wrong.
I think Brazil won 98, no?
World Cup 1994, U.S. Oh, the Brazil did.
Oh, yeah.
Brazil played against Italy in that World Cup final. So I wonder who was in that Brazil team.
I know Baggio was in the Italy team, I believe.
Let's see. Here we go. It went to penalties. It was 0-0 at the end of the World Cup final, and it went to penalties. That was in the Rose Bowl, Pasadena. 94,000 people. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy because the Rose Bowl is a pretty big place. I don't know if you may or may not know. The Rose Bowl is a huge kind of football stadium, American football stadium, really. And it holds a lot of people. 94,000 people is a huge stadium.
That's where UCLA plays their football games. It's a massive stadium. That's where we went to see Chelsea, Liverpool.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Play.
That's right. When they came on a U.S. tour, they played against each other. I remember seeing. I think it was it the Copa America? I think where it's all of the American, North America, South America teams. They came here and they played as well, and that place gets pretty awesome when it's filled. Dang, dude, that's crazy. That's awesome. It's a shame that I was 2 years old at that point and couldn't have gone. Or if I did, I wouldn't have known anything.
Yeah,
but
that's huge.
That's awesome. But yeah, so it's interesting just to see how since 1994 to now 2026, 22 years later, where is it 22 years or 32? Or is it 22? 32.
20, wait, since 1994,
it's 32 years.
Until the next World
Until
Cup.
the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
World
yeah, yeah,
Cup.
yeah, yeah.
Dang. Okay. So yeah, in the last 32 years, it's interesting to see how the U.S. has progressed, not only in terms of like the players that played, but also the culture, I guess. It's interesting how the one of the stipulations for having the World Cup 1994 was to have the U.S.'s own professional team or professional league. And by the time the World Cup comes around, we'll have a fully developed professional league, 30 teams around the nation. And I'm showing Andres now the the map of the United States that I will link below in the description with all the teams that we have here. But it's interesting to know that back in the 1996 we only had 10. Now we're gonna have 30, and it's just kind of crazy how it's come full circle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it will have in 2026. It'll be interesting to see like what stadiums they use. You know?
Yeah. So I took a class at UCLA, right, where the director of the LA Coliseum actually came in and said that like a few years ago they've already started making modifications at the Coliseum to be able to accommodate the Olympics that are going to be in 2028, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
The LA Olympics, and then the World Cup as well. I know they're making accommodations to actually have the field have a field right under it that isn't visible by all the fans, and that's going to be like a warm-up track for the people that are coming up next to speed up the process of the athletes warming up and things like that. So it's really interesting to see how they're going to shift away from that. I think overall there's a big shift towards premium seating, right? Like instead of seating 10 people, they'd rather make a box and fill that for tens of thousands of dollars for the premier games. Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they what stadiums they choose. Which ones can accommodate that large amount of people that are going to come.
Yeah. I know that the Olympics in 2028 is going to be in LA, Los Angeles. And then the World Cup in 2026 is going to be a tri-host of the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
I believe the opening games are in Mexico as well.
Yeah, opening games are in Mexico. Oh, here's like a little list of places, potential places that could be in use for the World Cup in 2026. It's interesting you bring up, though, before we go on to that, it's interesting you bring up the idea of making like premium seating a like focus. Because I remember watching a video recently where they were describing the way that airlines made before pandemic made their money, because like most of the money that they made on every flight is not because they had the plane full. It was just because they sold the first class, because each first class ticket is like thousands of dollars. And like the premium, like the amount of profit that they get from even just a full first class greatly outweighs the rest of the plane, no matter how expensive or full it comes. Yeah. And it's interesting that is kind of a sad reality of like just business in general, and especially in things where it's like limited capacity, kind of like a plane to a certain degree, and then like a stadium to a certain degree, because it's a one-time thing, you know. And like these like games may be only like 90,000 people is a lot of people, but you know, like you know, if everyone's ticket's only $20, you know, that's not necessarily a huge amount compared to like if you sell like 5,000 tickets of box seats for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's an interesting point to think about. It's not necessarily like a strategy for the common man, but you can definitely see how events like this, like the World Cup and the LA Olympics and things of those like high nature, like really wide-reaching nature, can be really profitable for people, for the people who are putting it on. You know? Yeah. So we're looking right now at the kind of the proposed map of the World Cup 2026. So I may or may not be able to put this on because this is like a publications photo, but if I can, I'll link it down below. But what I want to go through is because the World Cup is like going to be based within Canada, the United States, and Mexico. I kind of want to go through some of the stadiums that are currently in the MLS that at least reside in Canada and the United States. The Major League Soccer, for those who don't know, only participated in the two countries, Canada and United States. Mexico has its own soccer league, professional soccer league. Do you know what it's called? Is it called the?
I think it's like Liga MX.
Liga MX, right? Liga and then MX. That's the name of the professional league in Mexico. And what would you say that the professional league in Mexico is more popular around the world than the MLS, in your opinion?
That's a good question. That's a really close one. I think most people in Europe aren't tuning in to watch anybody play in Mexico in general. I think at the very least, the MLS kind of draws in those people that are fans of huge names. I mean, Ronaldinho is the most recent one to go to Mexico, but I doubt many people tuned in at that late stage of his career. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure people wanted to see how Gerrard would get on in his first game in the Galaxy, or Thierry Henry when he was playing in New York. I'm sure a lot of people tuned in to see those kind of games.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure, but I would assume so. It's not like
that's actually, I mean, I hate to spring that question on you, like kind of like that, mm-hmm. because I mean it's not something we prepared to talk or talked about before, but I'm just now thinking about it, just kind of with the whole World Cup bid in the foresight. It's an interesting idea. I wonder why that is. I think you could argue that the Mexico Liga MX, the Mexican Professional League, has a better soccer culture because I feel like there maybe is more commitment to the game of soccer in Mexico, mm-hmm. and there's less competition from other sports for sure in terms of attention and like broadcast rights. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to know that even though the U.S. and the MLS, which is the Professional Soccer League, isn't a priority, it still maybe has more broadcasting abilities worldwide because of just the way the U.S. is, in terms of sports. Do you think it kind of like rides the coattails of the popularity of sports in general in the U.S.?
I don't think so. I mean, it's not number 1, 2, or 3. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You'd have to say like football, baseball, and basketball are, like dominate.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see someone tuning in to see like a Galaxy game because they like the Lakers. But mm-hmm. I think in the sense that like Los Angeles could draw in a big talent like Zlatan. Right. And then people would want to watch Zlatan. He's been doing he had some really incredible goals. He's just like a box office type of player that's going to draw people in. Yeah. I think those kind of names, like the MLS has kind of taken risks on some players that are at the end of their careers. Mm-hmm. But you hear Mesut Ozil say recently that he wanted to play in Turkey and the United States before he retires. You hear Messi say that he wants to play in the United States before he retires. Same with Ronaldo. I think they know it like grows their brand, and I think they know people will tune in.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. That's a good point. I think you're right. I think it's maybe less about the broadcasting of the U.S. and more of just like it's kind of a destination for people, for superstars to come to. Mm-hmm. I mean, the United States has a huge market, a commercial market, right? Mm-hmm. And like we'll start with David Beckham, for example. He kind of kicked off the whole MLS celebrity stardom, right? Mm-hmm. He came to the Galaxy in the early 2000s, and kind of received a ton of popularity. Not that he wasn't already popular, but definitely like being in Los Angeles, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. David Beckham, it's like, and when Zlatan came not too long ago, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, he's a really like world class soccer player. And when he came, I mean, I saw him on like Jimmy Kimmel and like the late shows, and like it didn't definitely hurt his brand, even if, let's say, the soccer he was used to isn't as high here. You know?
And then also, I mean, you see Zlatan leave. I think he's in his late 30s now.
37, I think.
37. He goes back to AC Milan, and now they're, I think, at the top of the league as we film this. It's kind of it makes you see, like, Zlatan came. He's pushing AC Milan to the top of the table, but he couldn't lead the Galaxy to a championship. I think a lot of players think they're just gonna come here and dominate, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, I think that's true. It might have been the case earlier in the league, but as we get bigger and bigger, 30 teams in the league, and you know the US gets more competitive, and I feel like the quality's like skewing upwards over time. It becomes harder and harder for people like in their late 30s at the end of their careers to just come over and walk to an MLS championship. But I mean, it doesn't stop. I don't think it stopped the MLS from trying to get people to come anyway at any stage. You know,
no, definitely not.
But so going back to the World Cup in 2026, we're going to talk about a couple stadiums that. One that resides in Canada that hosts the Vancouver Whitecaps. They're one of the MLS teams. And we're going to also talk about one of the stadiums in Seattle that hosts the Seattle Sounders of MLS. And we're just going to go through them. I'll actually have some photos that I'll be able to add to the video. So when we talk about them, you'll see them. So we're going to first start with BC Place. That's in Vancouver. I know that the video or the World Cup map that we're looking at right now of the proposed stadiums that will host the 2026 does not include Vancouver. But I remember a couple years ago when the Women's World Cup was happening, this is the stadium that hosted the Women's World Cup final. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that it could be a World Cup venue. And so... Yeah, so the BC Place hosts the Vancouver Whitecaps. I actually think the Vancouver Whitecaps, for a good portion, hasn't really been like in contention for being like a really like high quality or like a championship like team in the MLS. But I actually do think that there's an interesting story here. Alphonso Davies was. Started his career here in the Vancouver Whitecaps, and he's Canadian. But if you may not know, Alphonso Davies is like 20, right? Or 19, a really young guy.
Very young, yeah.
And he started his professional career at the Vancouver Whitecaps, and he was traded or bought by a team in Germany called Bayern Munich for not a huge fee, but for a fee. And he now last season started for them as a left back, and in my opinion, I think he's probably in contention for the best left back in the world right now. Yeah,
I think he's up there. He's definitely up there with like Robertson is kind of tailed off a little bit, but you have to look at like his contributions to goals and assists, and he's as good going forward as he is defending.
Yeah,
he's so quick. He could just make up that space very quickly.
I think that's really true. The thing that separates him as a defender isn't necessarily like his eye for defending, but it's more like he's just so blisteringly fast that it's like there's not many people who could catch him in a foot race.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I saw when they played Barcelona, Bayern Munich played Barcelona last year. He like dribbled past like the entire Barcelona defense.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like Ronaldinho, like I'm gonna trick you. It was like I'm just gonna burn you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting that although Vancouver hasn't been in contention really for an MLS Cup, I do think though that it's kind of hard, in my opinion, it'd be hard to argue against, but I think that they have produced probably the best MLS player that's ever come out of MLS. I don't know of anyone else who's hit that heights that quickly from MLS.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the latest before that was Almiron from
Atlanta.
Yeah, but I can't think of another player that has reached those kind of heights that quickly.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing to talk about. The Vancouver Whitecaps, they have this beautiful stadium. It's a lot bigger than they use it for. The capacity is 54,000 people, so it's a huge stadium. But when they play the Vancouver Whitecaps, they have you'll probably see it in the photos. They have tarps that cover part of it, and they only have 22,000 people at the stadium when they play. But it still gets pretty raucous and loud, so it's still a pretty cool place to go. But yeah, I think Alphonso Davies is probably the highlight of Vancouver, at least recently. And I think he's a good poster child for the MLS in general. So that's Vancouver. And so now we move on to Seattle. Now, a couple of years ago, Andres and I actually went to Seattle on a trip, and we actually saw a Seattle Sounders game at what was then called CenturyLink Field, but now it's called Lumen Field. And honestly, it's a pretty nice stadium.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I think Seattle's just a beautiful city, and I think there's a lot that you can see in the background. I forget it's Mount
Rainier.
Yeah, yeah, you can see it in the background from some of the seats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a really beautiful stadium. The Seattle Seahawks play there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really nice stadium. The environment was really cool. We actually ended up sitting somewhere where they told us we weren't able to sit down. We showed up and we were actually in the standing section.
That's a good story.
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting. We got to experience the standing section, which we've never really sat in the they call it the Angel City Brigade section in the Galaxy, where they stand and chant the whole game. We've usually been off to the side or something like that, but we were in that section of Seattle, so that was pretty interesting. That was definitely an experience.
Yeah, that's a good story. So we planned a trip to Seattle, and we wanted to catch an MLS game just to see what it was like. And so Seattle Sounders plays in the same stadium as the Seattle Seahawks of the NFL. And so we bought our tickets and we showed up, we sat in our seats, but the stadium's kind of open no matter which way you walk. And so what happened was we were kind of not far from the field, but not as close as we would have liked, I guess. So what happened was before the kickoff, we checked online to see which seats were still available. And I'm not saying you should do this, but you can. And we checked to see what hadn't been sold, and we went to those seats and just stood there and sat there. And so by the time the game started, we knew that we would be fine because no one had bought those seats. Mm-hmm. So, and I remember the thing that really struck me as compared to the LA Galaxy and the games we've seen at the MLS there is they stand the whole game. Mm-hmm. They stand up and they're kind of more into it almost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's at least where we were standing or sitting, everyone was standing, everyone was cheering. And I remember the noise that they had when the teams were walking onto the field. Maybe it was because there's more people there. But I think also it's just, I think they kind of go harder, to be honest. The Seattleites, I feel are maybe more raucous, more loud, do you think?
Yeah, I think they probably carry over some of the energy from watching the Seahawks. I think also, I feel like LA fans are kind of spoiled. So I feel like they lost the Seattle Supersonics a while back. So I think when they have a team, they really learn to appreciate them. Mm-hmm. Not that they didn't appreciate the Supersonics, but they never know when a team could just leave them. So I think That's true. The Seattle Supersonics were a basketball team that were in Seattle, and actually, it's weird that Seattle doesn't have a basketball team. Yeah, they're talking about an expansion possibly soon, and that's one of the places being mentioned. Yeah, but, yeah, that'd be cool to see the Supersonics come back. That'd be cool. But yeah, so in terms of what is now called Lumen Field in Seattle. Capacity for NFL sometimes can get up to 72,000 people, which is huge. But for the MLS, it usually is around 37,000, which is still a lot bigger than the LA Galaxy and most stadiums, I think, in California for soccer. So that's pretty cool.
But yeah, I think Seattle's a cool place to go see soccer and sports in general. I think pretty nice city too. I remember when we went, it wasn't actually very rainy, was it? It was actually pretty sunny.
Yeah, I don't think it rained while we were there.
Yeah, I remember that, which is kind of odd because Seattle's known for being rainy and gloomy. But yeah, definitely a cool place to go. So with that, we're gonna go ahead and sign off. I appreciate it for everyone who's watching on YouTube. Go ahead, like and subscribe if you like the podcast, and yeah, catch us on Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, Omni Football Podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and have a great week, guys. Stay gold.